Seems so often in this body we tend not to learn from mistakes. We passed a bill, I guess part of a bill that the Senate sent, referred to as the TPA, but it's all about a trade agreement that will provide a structure in which the president can negotiate and dock other agreements into it. Since the TAA did not pass, then it can't apparently go directly to conference unless we pass an amendment to allow it to go to conference or some other way effectuate a conference on agreement. Speaker, I can only surmise that since the Speaker himself moved to reconsider, then there is something afoot in order to keep it from dying as it should have, since both the TPA and the TAA did not pass. But the TPA, you know, I read it. It's got some good aspects to it, but it's not in and of itself free trade. And, you know, as a judge in a district court, our highest level trial court in Texas, so many times I would be the fact finder without a jury. And so often you would sit and listen to the evidence and you would wonder, why would someone take the action they did? There's got to be some motivating factor. And you consider all the possibilities. We had a very rare visit from President Obama to the Capitol, trying to push people to vote for the TPA, this trade agreement, and the TAA. It was great to see him come out to the congressional baseball game last night. It's not something he does regularly. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm left to wonder. I mean, we haven't seen this president push this hard on very many bills over the last 6.5 years. And I'm left wondering, why would President Obama push so hard to pass this trade agreement structure that allows him to negotiate so many deals with so many different countries? And one possibility is he did it because he knew that Speaker Boehner was pushing to pass it, and it's possible that he really wanted to make Speaker Boehner and Mitch McConnell, the leader down in the Senate, make them look good. That's a possibility. Perhaps President Obama really was trying to make our Speaker and the Majority Leader Majority Leader McConnell look good. That's a possibility. I don't think it's terribly probable. In weighing all the evidence, it would seem to me that it is far more probable that the TPA will give this president far more power to fundamentally transform America in his remaining 1.5 years or so as president. That's what it appears to me. Now, one of our Republicans speaking that I have tremendous respect and admiration for had commented that we're not a nation that sits on the sidelines. And I agree, that used to be true. But we have basically sat on the sidelines as Christians and Jews are being persecuted and killed around the world in greater numbers than ever before. We have sat on the sidelines in Nigeria as precious little African girls are kidnapped and brutally sexually assaulted day after day, month after month. And then we see an article that actually this administration communicated, according to the article, to Nigeria that if they will change their laws to provide for same-sex marriage, possibly abortions be paid for, then the United States would not continue to sit on the sidelines, that we would actually help them stop radical Islamists. Of course, they don't use the term radical Islamists, but that's what they are. But would stop them, the radical Islamists, from continuing to kill and persecute Christians the way they are in Nigeria. And I talked to some folks that have been on a recent trip to Eastern Africa and have met and even prayed with leaders in East Africa. And people that I was going to be on the trip, but apparently the speaker feels if you oppose him, then you're not allowed to travel. Those rewards are saved for people to vote as he tells them to. But and I'll tell you what, if that's the price of speaking truth to power, it's still a great country. But people that went on that trip indicated that that leaders in Eastern Africa had indicated that the United States administration, the Obama administration, was telling them, in essence, what the article said happened in Nigeria, that if you'll change your laws to allow for same-sex marriage, though it totally was against their spiritual beliefs as Christians or Muslims, then we would help them with things like radical Islam, but otherwise we're not going to help them. So I appreciate hearing a Republican say the United States is not a nation that sits on the sideline, but this administration does. It sits on the sideline and uses power to fundamentally transform this country and other countries. We've seen that. Now, I see my very dear friend from Kentucky here on the floor, and I'd like to yield to him for his comments and thoughts.
Well, I appreciate that the gentleman from Texas would yield me some time to speak today. We had a vote on the TPA here, and I just wanted to spend some time to explain, and I think my colleague from Texas probably feels the same way, that I am for trade. I think trade is good. I'm not against trade. But today I voted against the Trade Promotion Authority, which would fast-track the TPP. And I just wanted to take a second to explain why I was compelled to vote against this legislation today. First of all, like my colleague, I've read the TPP. I've been down to the financial room, and it's a very thick document. There are 2 bound volumes, and there's a binder that goes with it as sort of a guide. But what struck me the most about this TPP document is the enormity of it. And my staff aren't even allowed to read the document. We're not allowed to have access to the internet while we're in there when we're looking at the document, not allowed to take notes from the room. And this document references other bound documents. So how could I possibly, one person, by myself in a confidential room, how could I possibly understand what some of the unintended consequences of this trade agreement would be if I can't understand the document, if I'm not allowed the resources to fully analyze this document? And I want there to be more daylight on this document before we put it on a path to approval. The other reason that I voted no today was that the implications of ceding our authority to the World Trade Organization struck me this week when we voted to overturn our country of origin labeling on beef and pork. Now, whether you think we should require companies to label beef and pork when they bring it into this country from another country, You know, whether that's a good thing or whether that's a bad thing, that doesn't matter. What disturbs me is that the reason for writing this law this week was the World Trade Organization told us we had to. They said, you've got to do that. And we swore an oath to the Constitution, not the World Trade Organization. And my concern is that this trade agreement could bind us to things that we don't even understand yet, because surely some trade agreement years ago has caused us this week to change our food labeling laws. And then, you know, the third and final reason that I voted against the TPA today, and this may be the best reason, in fact, is my constituents don't like it. I got 30 phone calls a day for the past week against this. I might have received 1 or 2 all week saying vote for it. But, you know, we didn't get a chip implanted in our brains when we came to Congress that makes us smarter than all of our constituents. And I think it's important to be humble, to know that we don't always have the right answer. We don't really have a whole lot more information than our constituents have in this case. And I think that their concerns that they expressed to me, like the president getting too much authority, that this president doesn't need more authority, that's a valid concern. And that there's not enough transparency, that's another valid concern. And I know my friend from Texas has expressed both of those concerns himself, and I'm sure he's hearing those from his constituents as well. But I appreciate the time that you yielded to me.
Well, and I'd like to follow up with the observation there about our constituents, because I wish I didn't, but I remember all too well how things went in this room on TARP, the Wall Street bailout. The vast number of Americans, the huge percentage of Americans, did not want us to pass the Wall Street bailout. And there was an FDIC former director named Isaacs that came, and he had a lot of economist support. He had a great free market solution, and people were excited when that passed. I know we had people clapping today, just like they did when Obamacare passed. A lot of people clapped when Obamacare passed, and then they got defeated in the next election, so they're not here to clap for this one. But and that clapped for the Wall Street bailout passing. Some of them didn't come back because the people could see this was not a good way to go. Now, one of the things I love about being a Republican is basically, as conservatives, we're optimists. You know, that we think things can get better, and that's why we're here. And I know you and I have worked so many times together, and we both, that's why we're here. We want to make things better, and we think we can. We've got a shot at making things better. But at some point, you at least have to take notice of the old Washington saying that no matter how cynical you get here in Washington, it's never enough to catch up. And I love that people could be aware that the president promised in Obamacare that if you liked your insurance, you could keep it. If you liked your doctor, you could keep it. He promised that that nobody on Medicare would be affected, that it only affect the reimbursements. Well, people have found out that those things were not true. They did lose the insurance they liked, lost the doctor they liked. Many people, well, Medicare recipients have found out, wait a minute, you said it wouldn't affect me, but what I found out, when you cut $700 billion from how much you reimburse the health care providers and my doctors, they're not able to see me. It does affect me. And then, of course, I remember, and I did consider Bart Stupak a friend, saw him not long ago. I still think of him as a friend. And I know he was pro-life and wanted to do what was right. And he was promised by the president that nothing in or about Obamacare would cause anybody who disagreed with abortion, had spiritual beliefs against abortion, nothing that they would ever have to buy would pay for abortion, no federal money would go for abortion, And as I understood it, he was even getting the president to put that in writing for him. Well, as Joe Wilson observed during a speech being given in here, I think he said it differently, but it turned out those things weren't true. Abortion is paid for with federal dollars. The federal government even has fought people in court, like these precious Catholic nuns, the Little Sisters of Mercy. They've dedicated their lives to helping our nation's poor and people that are downtrodden. Gosh, those are the kind of people that used to government officials revered, admired, respected. Not now, because those broken promises even resulted in this administration fighting them in court to try to force them to have insurance that paid for abortion that these precious nuns believed was murdering a child in the womb. So constituents were against TARP. There were people here that supported this free trade agreement, just as you and I support free trade, but they supported this TPA that truly will give the president more authority. And I remember some of these same people saying, look, we don't have to worry because by passing the bill we're about to pass, the president can't remove anybody from Guantanamo without giving us notice, and when he gives us notice, we can stop him. I mean, I've been told that. And in fact, the law is he can't remove anybody from Guantanamo without first giving us notice. The American people remember that. And they also happen to have noticed that the president cut a deal for a guy that looks like is going to be charged with desertion and released 5 terrorists from Guantanamo and didn't give us notice until after he'd released them. So I love the optimism that says, yes, there have been misrepresentations from this administration over and over and over and over. And now we've had 6.5 years of continued misrepresentations from an administration. And the good news is this time we really think he means it. Now, I love that kind of optimism. I really do. But I want to yield to my friend for his thoughts.
Yeah, well, you are an optimist, Mr. Gohmert, and I would wholeheartedly second that. But look, you're also a realist, and I think we all need to be realists. And the best way to keep those promises is not to make a promise you can't keep, or not to make a promise that you can't make somebody else keep. And so far, we've shown that we're pretty ineffectual here in Congress at keeping the president maintaining those promises. If you like the plan you have, you can keep it, was one of those promises I remember. And while we're talking about the Affordable Care Act, I remember Congress was told to pass it so you can see what's in it. And we're being told, pass the TPA so you can see what's in the TPP, at least so our constituents can see it. But I want to just close with this and not consume time.
My friend gets too far reclaiming my time. I want to point out, though, he and I have been down to the classified area and viewed the TPP, but as I understand it, the president is going to be allowed to add like 20% to that we have not even had an opportunity to see. So even when we say we've been down to the classified area, they made it available, we've been through it, we can't say that all of it was provided. If my gentleman, is that your understanding?
That's absolutely correct. And furthermore, the document that we viewed was a draft. It is not complete. And if you read it, virtually every page of it has a little footnote that says, oh, we're still working on this page here. And so, yeah, we are fast-tracking something that we can't see. We're not really going to be a party to the negotiations, and we can't control the outcome of it. So I think we should do that with great caution. And I just want to close with this. I want to say that the vote today was not a referendum on free trade. It was not a referendum on whether it benefits our country to trade with other countries. We know that. We believe it. And we've seen it. Trade is good. But this was a referendum on giving the president more authority. This was a referendum on voting for something we can't see, we can't verify. And this was a referendum on a huge, giant document. Reminds me of some of the omnibus bills we're given 2 days to read that come to this body, 1,600 pages. But this was a referendum on the process. And that's why they couldn't get the bill passed today. TPA is not a law yet. It didn't pass today. But we support free trade. I know my colleague does. We just don't support the TPA. And with that, I will yield back. Thank you.
Well, my friend will yield for a question. I'd like to, my friend is all the goings on very closely. The President has acted extraordinarily in reaching out to Congress, trying to push through this trade bill. I'm curious whether the gentleman from Kentucky, my friend, thinks maybe this, for the first time, is an effort by the President reaching out to make the Republican Party and Republican leadership look good, or does what kind of motivation do you think most likely caused him to reach out more than he has, as I recall, on a bill?
Well, I don't want to question anybody's motivations here in this body or in the other branches of the government, but I will say I have seen a zeal for the deal, a zeal for the trade deal, a zeal for a deal that people don't fully even understand, but they want to get the deal done. And so I think they just need to slow down, look at the terms of the deal, get some experts in that room with you when we were looking at that secret document. Have them tell you what all those things mean in there. And just kind of calm down the zeal for the deal. And we can do trade, we can do free trade, we can do trade agreements, but not this giant omnibus-like trade agreement. Thank you.
I appreciate my friend, but my problem is having had so many provisions explained. For example, this won't affect seniors by cutting $700 billion out of Medicare. And, gee, if you'll just renew the Patriot Act, Section 215, gosh, you've got to be a terrorist before we get any of your personal information, your data. There have just been so many explanations and promises that have been made. And with regard to Section the Patriot Act, that was over 2 administrations. But there have been so many representations on what an administration, particularly this administration, believes something means that allowed activity far beyond that, that even if this administration or the prior administration says this is what something means, I'm sorry, the judge completely hasn't left me, the Chief Justice completely hasn't left me, and so I care more about what the language says on its face than what somebody tells me they think it will mean or how they will apply it. Again, you know, we were told things about Obamacare and the way it would be interpreted and carried out, the Patriot Act, the way it would be interpreted and carried out, that turns out simply was not the case. And it's still why I'm concerned over the part of Section 215, even though I've been assured, oh no, it really doesn't mean anything, but it says not only can they gather the data of people associated with terrorists or involved in international terrorism, but it has this little 2-letter disjunctive that or clandestine intelligence activities. And nobody will explain where that is defined in writing, because until it's defined adequately in writing, that can mean anything anybody wants it to mean. It's just too vague, allows too much arbitrariness and capriciousness. So I'm not as concerned about what people tell me something says or means, because I know when you put words in a bill, at some point, some judge somewhere is going to say, you know what? Those words actually say, they mean exactly what they say. So I'm concerned about the power that's given to the President. I'm concerned about the ability of the President to cut deals And if he happens to forget to give us notice, as he happened to do with regard to the 5 terrorists that were released from Guantanamo, then I don't see this body stepping up and stopping him. I know we absolutely pledged we were going to on the illegal and constitutional amnesty he did, but then we decided, well, we'll just trust a judge in Texas that his ruling will be upheld all the way to the Supreme Court, and so we gave up on that fight as a body. But I just have not seen anything from the House and Senate, when it was under total Democratic control and now, that indicates we are going to be able to step up and stop the president if there's a violation of the law or violation of personal commitments that were made. And because of that, I was not comfortable voting for TPA. I could not vote for it. I voted against TAA because it would facilitate TPA. And I do have to make a parenthetical note here. It's interesting. We're assured that TPA is going to create this massive number of jobs, but we have to, absolutely have to pass TAA, which creates additional welfare, because there are going to be so many Americans that lose their jobs as a result of TPA. So it's going to create all these American jobs, but we got to have TAA so we can cover all the American jobs that are lost, go overseas, when the fact is, you want a free trade agreement, you want to blow the doors off the barriers in the world to American goods and services, let's cut the biggest tariff that any nation in the world puts on its own goods and services, called a corporate tax. Let's cut it. Get it at least, if not eliminated, get it below that of China. And the cuts to the prices will be so astounding that the doors will come down. They'll have to come down, because our goods will not only be the best in the world, but they'll be the best prices in the world. So we want real free trade. You're not going to get it by cutting a deal with countries that manipulate their currencies. Those were excellent points that some across the aisle made. You're talking about free trade with countries that manipulate their own currencies? You're not going to get free trade with countries that manipulate their own currency, because they can always maneuver around you and make their product better. So this didn't address the manipulative nature of some nations' currencies. Without that, you're not going to have a free trade deal. So I would like to be an optimist and say that this bill that President Obama pushed so hard, historically hard for his administration, to get passed, I would like to be the optimist, as so many of my colleagues are, and say, but the reason President Obama was pushing for this so hard is this will really curtail his ability to make agreements without our agreement. I'd like to think that he worked that hard to curtail his own, but the realist, the old judge in me comes back and has to say the verdict is he pushed for this TPA because it was going to give him a lot more power than he has now. And with that, should I yield to my friend from Florida? Be happy to do so. How much time is remaining?
Gentleman has 30 seconds remaining.
Yield those 30 seconds, my friend from Florida.
I thank my colleague from Texas, and I appreciate your loyalty, your patriotism to our country, and I look forward to working with you in the future to talk about future negotiations to make sure that the federal government, every time we act, every time we move, every time we vote, is to do what's best for America, to make America stronger, more competitive, and a better nation to pass on to our next generation. With that, I yield back, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank my friend, and yield back.
Gentleman yields back.